The airport loudspeaker echoed through the terminal, cold and metallic, but not as cold as the stares fixed on him. 2 security officers gripped Noah Bennett's arms, dragging him out of the first-class lounge as if he were a criminal. In his trembling hands, the $3 billion contract shook slightly. No one in the boarding hall knew that the man in the grey suit being escorted away was about to buy the very airline humiliating him, and that in just a few weeks he would bring it to its knees from the inside. The winter wind from the boarding gate lashed across his face, as bitter as the humiliation burning under his skin. Noah said nothing. He didn't shout, didn't resist. He simply stood still, silent, watching the crowd flow past, some raising their phones to record, some sneering others glancing with uneasy pity. A part of him wanted to scream, "I'm the CEO, I've flown first class here 30 times. But another part, quieter, stronger, had long since learned to swallow humiliation with reason. The sign behind him blinked. SkyRealm Airlines first-class priority, its reflection glinting in his eyes like mockery. A flight attendant, tidying the seating charts, leaned toward her co-worker and whispered, "I told you he doesn't look like someone who flies first class." The words cut into him like a small blade, not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to leave a scar. Noah was used to this feeling, the feeling of being judged, scrutinized, doubted simply because he was born with the wrong color skin. Ever since he was a boy on the south side of Chicago, he had watched his mother argue with a landlord just to keep their tiny, freezing apartment in the middle of winter. She worked 3 jobs at once, yet every night she still taught him, never let the world decide who you are. Let your mind and your character do that. The day he received a full scholarship to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, she cried harder than she ever had before. Not from pride, but from fear. Fear that the world out there would crush a brilliant black man before he ever had the chance to shine. Now, standing in that airport, those memories returned. Every time an investor refused to meet him because we're looking for someone who fits our image. Every time a bank rejected his loan despite a flawless application. Every time a client asked, "Are you really the programmer or just the face?" Noah had survived it all. He built Bennett Dynamics from a rented garage into a $5 billion technology empire, specializing in cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and enterprise software. He had become known as the Black Renaissance of tech. But today, a single disdainful glance from a check-in agent had the power to drag him back to the starting line of pain. Not a businessman, not a billionaire, just another black man who wasn't trusted. The golf cart carrying him rolled past the first-class area, surrounded by curious stares and hushed whispers. Shame mixed with anger coursing through his veins. He tightened his grip on the contract in his hands, the very agreement he would sign the next morning to acquire AeroSense Labs, an aviation software company capable of transforming the entire industry. If the deal went through, Bennett Dynamics would become the first black-owned tech company to control international flight safety infrastructure. And the cruel irony was that the airline now humiliating him was AeroSense's biggest client, a brutal coincidence or destiny itself. As he sat in the waiting area, his phone buzzed. The name on the screen read, Mia Parker, his assistant. Her voice trembled with concern. "Boss, I just saw the video on Twitter. Someone recorded them dragging you away." Noah closed his eyes. His voice was low, hoarse, but steady. "Mia, don't delete it. Document everything about SkyRealm today. Employee names, flight number security cameras, complaint policies, and their shareholder structure. "What are you planning to do?" she asked. Noah opened his eyes, gazing through the glass, where the Sky Realm logo reflected back at him like a cold scar. "Nothing, at least not yet." The loudspeaker announced Sky Realm Flight 2178 to Atlanta is now boarding. Noah stood walking calmly toward the gate. He passed the first-class row, where white men in tailored suits raised glasses of champagne. Lauren, the flight attendant from earlier, avoided his gaze, pretending to be busy. Noah said nothing. He simply nodded, a quiet gesture that made her shiver, though she didn't understand why. As the plane lifted off, Noah didn't sleep. He watched the lights of New York shrink below, glowing like fading memories in the dark. In his mind, hundreds of thoughts collided: rage, humiliation, hurt, and beneath it all a cold, deliberate calculation forming piece by piece. At 12,000 meters above the ground, he took out his pen and wrote a line on the edge of the contract. "There is no greater victory than making those who looked down on you bow their heads. But the real victory is making them change." Noah looked up. Outside the window, sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling across his face, not with shame, but with the quiet danger of a man who had forgotten how to be angry. At that same moment across the country, thousands of people were watching the video titled "Black CEO Denied First-Class Seat on Sky Realm Airlines." The comment section exploded outrage, spreading like wildfire. Online, the hashtag #SkyRealmShame began climbing the charts. But high above the earth, the man at the center of the storm sat motionless, an unshakable stone in a raging river. He didn't yet know that just 48 hours later, the world would call him by a new name, the man who made the entire airline industry kneel before justice. And it all began with a single first-class seat taken away. 15 years ago, on a cold morning in Chicago, before the sun had even risen, Noah Bennett stood outside a small mechanical workshop, gripping a freshly printed newspaper. Inside, his mother, Evelyn Bennett, was sweeping the floor, dark circles marking her tired eyes after her third shift of the day. The harsh light from the fluorescent tube glinted off her sun-worn face beads of sweat, tracing down her neck and collar. Noah stood there watching his chest tightening. He was 16 then, with nothing but the innocent belief that if you worked hard enough, the world would be fair. That illusion shattered one evening when he and his mother stopped at a downtown grocery store. The cashier, a man with slick blonde hair, smirked as she handed him a worn $20 bill and said, "You sure this money's real, ma'am?" It was a small comment, almost casual, but it was the first time Noah ever saw his mother bow her head in silence. From that moment on, he swore to himself, no one will ever make her bow again. At 18, Noah won a full scholarship to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, majoring in computer science. The day he left home, Evelyn handed him a small leather-bound notebook, its cover worn with time. "Every door has its own lock, Noah," she said softly. "Learn how to open it, not how to beg someone else to." 4 years later, the young black student graduated valedictorian. When his name was called at the commencement ceremony, the entire hall stood and applauded. But Noah's eyes were fixed on only one person, the woman in the last row quietly wiping away tears. Few noticed that throughout the entire ceremony, Evelyn Bennett never sat down, not even once. Noah began his career at a software firm in Boston. He was the only engineer on the team who hadn't graduated from an Ivy League school. Every time he spoke up in meetings, his manager, a white man named David Klein, interrupted him halfway through, then repeated his ideas as if they were his own. When the team's project later won Innovation of the Year, it was David who took the stage. Noah simply stood in the crowd clapping. He wasn't angry, he observed, and he learned. 3 years later, he quit joining forces with two like-minded friends, Aaron Lee, a Korean-American engineer, and Julian Carter, a black programmer. Together they founded Bennett Dynamics in a rented garage on the outskirts of Boston. Their startup capital was $7,000. Their computers were second-hand, bought off Craigslist. Their dream was to build cybersecurity software capable of detecting and stopping intrusions before hackers could strike. Every night, Noah worked until 3 in the morning. They ate instant noodles, slept on the floor, and more than once, their keyboards bore stains of blood from overworked fingers. When Aaron joked, "We're insane," Noah smiled and replied, "No, we're rewriting how the world sees people like us." But the world wasn't quick to welcome them. At his first investor meeting, the man across the table didn't even look at him, just skimmed his resume, and said, "Cybersecurity, huh? I thought you'd be in technical support or HR." No one said it outright, but the message was clear. You don't look like a tech founder. A bank rejected their $200,000 loan request, calling it too risky. One advisor even suggested, if you want serious consideration, maybe have a white partner represent you. Noah said nothing. He simply closed his laptop, stood and walked out. On his way back to the garage, he saw an old sign that read, "No overnight parking." He laughed to himself. That's fine. I don't have time to sleep anyway. 3 years later, Bennett Dynamics launched Aegis Shield, a groundbreaking security platform that Global Tech licensed for $60 million. At 33, Noah entered the top 50 innovators to watch list for the first time. But instead of celebrating, he donated 30% of the profit to start a scholarship fund for black students pursuing technology. On stage at the award ceremony, when a reporter asked, "Do you feel proud to be the first black recipient of this award?" Noah answered, "I'm not proud to be the first. I just hope I won't be the last." At 43, he led a $5 billion empire with over 4,000 employees and offices from San Francisco to London. Yet despite the Bentley, the Patek Philippe watch, and the dinners in glass towers, he kept one old habit, arriving 30 minutes early just to watch his employees walk in. He once told his assistant, Mia Parker, "I used to walk into rooms when no one wanted me there. Now my job is to make sure others can walk in without fear." Mia smiled softly and said, "You've already won, Noah. You can rest now." He shook his head. "No. This is only the first round. The real game hasn't even begun." That March, Bennett Dynamics prepared for the biggest deal in its history, the acquisition of Aerosense Labs, an aviation software company with predictive systems capable of identifying technical failures before they happened. The contract was worth $3 billion. If successful, Bennett Dynamics would dominate the global flight safety market, and more importantly, SkyRealm Airlines, Aerosense's largest client, would fall under Noah's influence. The night before his flight to Atlanta to finalize the deal, he sat alone in his office, on the 40th floor, overlooking the glowing city of San Francisco. The wind from the bay whispered through the glass, carrying the scent of salt and fog. He flipped through the thick stack of contracts, but his eyes drifted toward a small framed photo of his mother Evelyn, smiling in her old uniform. He murmured, "You once told me I can't change how people see me, but I can change the system that makes them see me that way." The next morning, He chose a charcoal grey suit, a black tie, and polished Oxford shoes. For Noah, it wasn't just fashion, it was armour. In a world where judgment often came before merit presentation was the only way to buy a few seconds to be seen for his talent, not his skin colour. He stepped outside into the crisp morning air, the San Francisco sky still veiled in mist. The driver opened the door of the Bentley. His phone rang. It was Mia, her voice calm and precise. "Your first-class ticket with Sky Realm Airlines is confirmed. Route New York to Atlanta. The legal team is ready. Everything's perfect." Noah smiled, his voice low and steady. "Good. Today marks the beginning of a new era." What he didn't know was that just a few hours later, on that very same flight, the system he was about to acquire would publicly humiliate him, and from that moment on, a different kind of era would begin, one where justice would no longer come from power, but from the quiet resolve of a man who had lived his entire life inside prejudice. The New York sky was heavy and grey mist curling around glass buildings that reflected the early morning lights. A sleek black Bentley rolled to a stop in front of Terminal 4 at Sky Realm Airlines. The door opened, and Noah Bennett stepped out. Composed, his suit perfectly pressed his tie, centered, as if every detail about him had been measured by the strictest standards of discipline. Today was not just another business trip. It was the biggest turning point in a career that had already lasted 20 years. If the AeroSense Labs deal succeeded, Bennett Dynamics would become the first technology company led by a black founder to take control of the global flight safety system. A massive door would open, and the world would no longer be able to ignore him. What he did not know was that in this very place, everything would start to crumble, not because of a technical breakdown or a financial loss, but because of the invisible prejudice that had followed him his entire life. A bright voice came through his earpiece. "Mr. Noah, I have sent the updated itinerary. The AeroSense team will be waiting in Atlanta at 3. I have already prepared the final draft for you to sign." "Very good, Mia," he replied. He smiled, took off his sunglasses, his sharp gaze reflecting back at him in the airport window. "Today we are going to rewrite the definition of trust. Not trust in people, but trust that justice can still exist in the marketplace." Mia's voice wavered slightly. "You always sound as if you were getting ready for battle." Noah chuckled. "Because in this world, success is also a form of combat." Inside the terminal, bright white lights shone down on a long line of passengers. The loudspeakers called flights in a steady rhythm, blending with the sound of suitcase wheels rattling against the polished floor. Noah walked toward the Sky Realm first-class check-in desk and scanned the QR code on his phone. The woman behind the counter, Lauren Mitchell, her blonde hair neatly pinned up, and her smile practiced and professional, looked up. That smile faltered when she saw him. Her expression shifted from friendly to doubtful to cold. "Are you sure you are in the right line?" she asked, stretching out the words, trying to sound gentle, but unable to hide a hint of condescension. "Economy is over there." Someone behind him let out a quiet laugh, half covered by a hand. Noah kept his voice calm. "I am flying first class. Seat 2A. He held out his phone. The ticket glowed clearly on the screen, first class verified. Lauren frowned and glanced down at it. "You said seat 2. "This ticket costs more than $3,000. Noah did not move. His eyes remained steady, his voice low and even. "I am well aware of the price." She said nothing more, just reached for the internal phone. Her voice dropped, but not enough to keep him from hearing. "We have a passenger who does not match the profile. He says he is first class. I think there might be a mistake. 3 minutes later, a tall man in a blue suit walked out, Kyle Benson, the floor supervisor. His face carried the easy confidence of someone used to giving orders. "Good morning, sir. I am the supervisor here. It looks like there is a small issue with your ticket." "There is no issue," Noah replied. "I confirmed everything online yesterday." "May I see your ID?" Noah took out his wallet and handed over his driver's license. Kyle inspected it carefully, his eyes moving from the card to Noah's face, as if searching for something that did not add up. After a long moment, he nodded and spoke slowly. "Mr. Bennett, who exactly booked this ticket for you?" "My company's travel department." "And what company is that?" "Bennett Dynamics." Kyle's eyes flickered. Then he tilted his head and gave a thin smile. "Oh, that does sound familiar." He tapped a few commands into his tablet, then shook his head. "It seems there is a problem in the system. Your ticket has not been fully verified." "You just said it has not been verified." "On what basis?" Noah asked. "We are only following procedure." It looks like he emphasized the words there was a payment error somewhere. By now, several passengers had turned to look. A young woman discreetly raised her phone to start recording. Noah felt his heart beat, slow not from fear, but from the dull familiarity of it all. "I have flown with Skyrealm more than 30 times, always with this type of ticket. If there is an error, point it out clearly. I will need you to step aside while we run a few more checks." 2 security guards appeared, their hands resting near their belts, where their tasers hung. The air around them thickened, as if someone had just committed a serious crime. A clear, steady female voice rang out from a short distance away. "Excuse me, what is going on here?" A middle-aged woman walked up, took in the scene, and shook her head slightly. "Again, this is shameful." Her word slipped in like a needle, and for a brief second, Kyle's confidence faltered, but he held his posture. Noah glanced at his watch. He had 3 hours to make it to a meeting where a $3 billion contract would be signed. If he walked away now, he could lose the biggest opportunity of his life. If he stayed, he would have to endure a few more minutes of humiliation. He drew a deep breath and said quietly, "I will sit anywhere, but remember this day." Lauren's brow tightened for a moment, a flicker of unease she tried to hide. She led him past the first-class cabin, where other business travelers were sipping wine and reading newspapers. A silver-haired man glanced at Noah and smirked. "I guess Skyrealm has started expanding its charity program." A few small laughs followed. Noah did not reply. He tightened his grip on his briefcase, lowered his head slightly, and kept walking. Each of his footsteps echoed dryly against the stone floor, merging with the boarding call. Skyrealm Flight 1875 boarding in 10 minutes. On the plane, he was assigned the last row of the economy cabin, right next to the restroom. The seat shook, children cried, and the smell of coffee mixed with air freshener into a suffocating haze. Noah sat still and stared out the window. Through the glass, he could see Skyrealm's silver-winged logo, catching the light, bright, proud, and hollow. In his mind, he replayed every sentence he had heard. "Are you sure you are in the right line? Perhaps you bought the wrong ticket system error." None of those phrases were new. They were just fresh copies of the same suspicion he had heard his entire life. He unlocked his phone and typed a message to Mia. "Note this. Skyrealm Flight 1875, Archive, all public data shareholders complaint, History Executive Team Financial Model. I want a full report when I land in Atlanta." Mia replied at once. "Understood." "Are you all right?" Noah looked out at the sky. a white glare swallowing the horizon. Not yet, but they are about to be in trouble. The plane shuddered as it climbed. Around him, passengers drifted into short naps, while Noah opened his laptop. On the screen, the AeroSense contract appeared, the $3 billion figure burning in the middle of dense legal text. He reread Clause 42, the section on strategic partners. The name Sky Realm Airlines stood out clearly in the list. He smirked. How ironic. The people insulting me are surviving on the technology I am about to own. Beneath his calm exterior, a storm was forming. Not a storm of blind rage, but of calculation. Noah was not the kind of man who reacted impulsively. He was the kind who waited for the right moment to strike. Sunlight broke through the clouds and washed over his face, leaving one side in brightness and the other in shadow. In that instant, Noah Bennett was no longer just a polished executive on his way to sign a contract. He was a man who had been humiliated, carrying a silent fire inside him, about to use his intelligence, his power and his capacity to endure, to burn down an entire system. When the plane landed, his phone lit up. The video of you being removed from the first-class counter is spreading. 200,000 views in 2 hours. Noah simply smiled. He straightened his tie and murmured, "Good. The more people see it, the fewer people get away with it." In the warm yellow light of Atlanta's airport, he stepped off the plane, his shoes clicking in a steady rhythm. No one around him knew that at that very moment he had just walked off a flight of prejudice and into a revolution of justice. The Atlanta sky hung like a dull sheet of silver, reflecting the harsh midday sun of early March. Noah Bennett stepped out of the terminal, his shoulder weighed down by the briefcase, carrying the $3 billion contract. His tie was crooked, his shirt stained with a splash of coffee, the remnants of a humiliating flight in economy class. He checked his watch. Only 25 minutes remained before the meeting with AeroSense Labs. It was not just a signing. It was the convergence point of 2 decades of effort. A driver in a black suit waited at the VIP exit, holding a sign that read, "Mr. Bennett, First Class Arrival." The driver hesitated when he saw Noah coming from the regular exit, looking exhausted, his clothes rumpled. "Sir, I thought you would be coming from a different gate." Noah simply replied, "It is fine. Let us go." His voice was cold and clipped, betraying no emotion. The car sped through crowded streets. Atlanta rose up around them, with glass towers, billboards for airlines, and an electronic screen flashing a headline, "Black CEO denied first-class seat on Sky Realm Airlines. Video hits 2 million views." Noah glanced at the display inside the car. 2 million views in just a few hours. Mia texted, "3 news outlets are requesting interviews. Do not respond yet. I am checking Sky Realm's stock situation." He replied briefly, "Good. Let them talk. The more people know, the easier it is for their true face to show." When the car stopped in front of AeroSense Labs headquarters, the tall glass building shimmered in the afternoon sun. Noah inhaled deeply, straightened his tie, and quickly wiped the coffee stain on his sleeve with a handkerchief. Inside, the marble floors gleamed. The reception staff recognized him, their eyes a mix of curiosity and admiration. "Mr. Bennett, the board of directors, is waiting on the 42nd floor." He nodded and stepped into the elevator. In the reflection of the steel walls, he saw his own face, composed but with dark circles under his eyes. He smiled faintly at himself. "They can take away my first-class seat, but they will never take my resolve." The doors opened, and the penthouse meeting room emerged under cold white light. On the far side of the table sat 6 men in immaculate suits, Gregory Shaw, the Chief Executive Officer of AeroSense, and the rest of the board. No one stood to greet him. Not a single handshake. Gregory glanced at his watch, his voice as hard as steel. "You are late, Noah. We thought you had cancelled." Noah remained calm. "I just came from a rather special flight." Another man let out a quiet chuckle. "We heard you flew economy. Did not expect the chief executive of a $5 billion company to be that practical." Soft, sour laughter rippled around the room. Noah set his briefcase on the table, opened it, and took out the contract. "I am here to talk about the figure $3 billion, not about airplane seats." Gregory skimmed the documents, then pushed another stack of papers toward him. "Before we go further, we want to update the terms. The market is volatile, and our shareholders want more security. We are adjusting the price to $3.45 billion and adding a few performance conditions." Noah looked up, his gaze sharp as a blade. "We agreed on this last month." "Markets change fast," my friend Gregory replied with a smile. "Either you accept it, or we consider other partners." The air in the room grew thick. Noah flipped through the new documents, his voice dropping lower, each word precise. "You think I am at a disadvantage because of what happened this morning?" Gregory shrugged. "Not exactly. But we do need stability. The media is talking a lot about you. Shareholders do not like risk." A gentle knock sounded at the door. Gregory's assistant stepped in and whispered something to him. Gregory glanced at his tablet, his expression shifting. He turned the screen toward Noah. On it, a breaking headline blazed: "Skyrealm Airlines under fire for racial profiling incident involving Bennett Dynamics CEO." Gregory fell silent for a few seconds. The mood in the room shifted. The eyes of the board members moved from contempt to hesitation. Noah understood. With a single piece of news, the entire board had turned. He closed the folder lightly and spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "Do you know what is interesting? Skyrealm AeroSense's largest client is exactly where that incident took place. And right now, the whole world is talking about how they treat black customers." Gregory frowned slightly. Another board member flipped through a report and muttered, "Skyrealm accounts for 40% of our revenue." Noah looked straight at Gregory. "And they are now on the brink of a public relations crisis. I am wondering if a few more details were to leak about discriminatory policies inside the Skyrealm system. How much do you think AeroSense's valuation would suffer?" Gregory said nothing. He understood the implication. Noah had just confirmed the very thing he feared most. Skyrealm was quietly indebted to the very technology propping them up. After the meeting, Gregory asked Noah to stay and talk privately. In his office, Gregory lowered his voice. "Look, Noah, I know what happened this morning was terrible, but do not let it get in the way of this deal." Noah shrugged slightly. "I do not let emotions interfere with business. But there are things you cannot separate." "What do you mean?" Gregory asked. Noah walked toward the window and looked out over the city. The afternoon light fell across the financial district, reflecting off his face like a thin silver blade. When injustice happens to one person, it is a tragedy. But when it happens systematically, it is an opportunity for anyone clear-headed enough to see it. Gregory stood still. In that moment, he no longer saw a humiliated executive. He saw a man calculating how to change the entire balance of power. When Noah left the building, the sun had already set. His phone lit up with another message from Mia. "Skyrealm's stock is down 6% after the video. Some investors are pulling out. CNN is requesting an interview." He replied, No interviews. Gather internal data on Skyrealm human resources reports, litigation history shareholder lists. What are you planning to do? She asked. Build a map. Every snake has its path. He looked up at the darkening sky. A Skyrealm plane cut across the horizon, its blinking lights looking almost mocking. Noah pressed his lips together. The anger had faded. In its place was a cold, focused idea taking shape. They think they humiliated me, he whispered. But what they really did was give me a reason to start a revolution. That night in his hotel room in downtown Atlanta, Noah sat surrounded by the glow of his laptop screens. Dozens of windows were open, Skyrealm stock chart lists of lawsuits, internal complaints, financial statements, articles that had been deleted. Mia Derrick and the analytics team were online with him. Are you sure you want to pursue this? Derrick asked, his voice tense. Noah answered softly. It is not about wanting to. It is about having to. He pointed at a line of data on the screen. Skyrealm Airlines chairman, Charles Whitman. Major shareholders, Brookfield Investments, Orion Aviation Group. Discrimination complaints, 317 cases in 3 years, 87% blocked by non-disclosure agreements. Noah narrowed his eyes. Good. We start with that number. They think this is just a viral video, but I'm going to turn it into a lawsuit that forces the entire airline industry to change its blood. He closed the laptop, the fading light of the screen, reflecting off his face, taut like a drawn wire. Outside, Atlanta sank into night, while inside that room, a plan for retaliation through intellect had just been set in motion. And on that very night, a seed named Operation Horizon was planted, a plan that would not just make Skyrealm apologize, but would one day force it to belong to the very man they tried to humiliate. The Atlanta night was thick and dark as black honey. On the 27th floor of the Grand Regency Hotel, the glow from laptops and monitors filled the room like the control center of a secret operation. Noah Bennett stood at the center, his shirt sleeves, rolled-up eyes, fixed on the wall-sized projection of data. In those columns of numbers and words, he didn't just see statistics, he saw living proof of a system of discrimination built with cold, logical precision. Beside him, Mia Parker updated the reports, her voice trembling slightly with anger. In the last 3 years, Skyrealm has had over 300 complaints related to discrimination. Most of them were buried under non-disclosure agreements and flight vouchers. Not a single case was made public. Derek Miles, the chief of staff, clasped his hands behind his back, his tone heavy. They turned other people's humiliation into operational costs. They didn't fix the problem, they budgeted for the cost of silence. Noah said nothing. He stepped closer to the wall and zoomed in on a data field labeled Passenger Comfort Index. Under the column, algorithmic priority parameters clearly classified passengers based on skin color, last names, country of departure, and even the type of bank card used. He read softly. They use an algorithm to discriminate a machine, taught to doubt human beings because of their names. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but from fury, the kind that had been building inside him for years. The phone rang. On the screen appeared the name Charles Whitman, CEO of Skyrealm Airlines. Mia looked at him nervously. Are you going to answer? Noah nodded and put the call on speaker. Whitman's voice came smooth and polished, polite, to the point of being fake. Mr. Bennett, this is Charles Whitman. I'm truly sorry about what happened this morning. I wanted to personally apologize and make it clear that Skyrealm does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. Noah leaned back against the table, his tone calm and measured. "What happened this morning? You mean dragging a first-class passenger out of line because he was black? You call that an incident?" A short silence followed. Then Whitman forced his voice to stay soft. "We're conducting an internal investigation. It may have been a misunderstanding between staff and customer. I'd like to personally offer compensation." Noah smiled, though the smile never reached his eyes. "Compensation? How much we can discuss a reasonable amount," Whitman replied. "I'm sure we can handle this discreetly between businessmen." His voice dropped lower, heavy with implication. Noah tilted his head and spoke directly into the microphone. "You know what's interesting, Charles? I used to think Sky Realm was just another airline. But today you've made me curious. And when I get curious, I don't stop until I own the whole game." On the other end of the line, Whitman's breathing quickened. His tone shifted, losing its practiced friendliness. "Mr. Bennett, I'd advise you not to turn a small issue into a war. You don't want to make enemies in this industry." Noah closed his eyes and said quietly, "You're wrong. I don't want enemies. I want evidence." He hung up. The room grew heavy like static before a thunderstorm. 2 a.m, and the light still burned bright. The Bennett Dynamics Technical Division had been mobilized through secure channels. Cybersecurity experts, some of the brightest minds who once worked to protect U.S. government systems, were now dissecting Sky Realm's network. A young programmer reported, "We found hidden code in their booking software. It automatically tags passengers with common minority surnames as low priority. The algorithm triggers additional ID checks and removes them from upgrade eligibility." Mayer's voice shook. "My God, they call that Customer Optimization Protocol." Noah folded his arms, his eyes cold. "No, what they're doing is legalizing discrimination." He turned to Derek. "Prepare the legal documents. Send all of this data to Nina Patel at headquarters in San Francisco. I want her to start drafting the lawsuit. But don't go public yet. They think I want money. I'll show them I want control." At 4 a.m, the hotel window stood slightly open, the sound of distant traffic carried in by the night wind. Noah sat alone, staring down at the city below. The golden lights looked like thousands of silent eyes, watching, judging. He thought of his mother's face, of the days when supermarket security guards followed her every step, simply because she'd touched something expensive. He used to believe that once he reached the top, moments like that would end. But now he understood success doesn't shield you from prejudice. It only forces you to endure it quietly, more elegantly, and more painfully. He picked up his phone and sent a message to Mia tomorrow, 9 a.m. "Call the executive team. Project code Horizon. Target Sky Realm Airlines." Then he turned off the lights. The room fell into darkness, with only the city glow casting half light across his face, half in brightness, half in shadow. The next morning, at the Bennett Dynamics headquarters in San Francisco, an emergency meeting was held in the strategy room on the 41st floor. On the central screen appeared the image of Sky Realm Airlines, with the title Operation Horizon, Phase 1. 12 people sat around the table, the heads of legal, finance, communications, and engineering. Noah stood at the head remote in hand. "They humiliated me, but this isn't just personal. This is a system built on bias. I'm not going to sue for money. I'm going to buy the very company that discriminated against me." The room fell silent for several seconds. The chief financial officer finally spoke. "You can't be serious. Sky Realm is valued at $8 billion. Even if you win the lawsuit, we can't possibly." Noah cut him off, his tone unwavering. I don't need to buy it directly. I'll take it down from the inside. When their stock collapses, when investors flee, I'll buy back piece by piece until they no longer recognize who the real owner is." He projected a forecast graph onto the screen. Mayer added, "The video is spreading worldwide. We predict Skyrealm's stock will drop at least 15% in the next 2 weeks. If we release proof of the discriminatory algorithm, that number could double." Derek chimed in, "I've contacted 4 major investment funds, dissatisfied with Skyrealm's management. They're ready to move if someone leads the charge." Noah nodded. "And that leader will be us." He ended the meeting with a line that made the room fall completely still. Justice doesn't come from the courts. It comes from ownership. If they can't understand respect, I'll make them learn by paying for it with their own company. No one clapped. No one spoke. But as Noah walked out of the room, under the pale San Francisco morning light, everyone understood from that moment on Operation Horizon was no longer a business plan. It was the personal war of a man once underestimated, but who knew how to strike back, with strategy, not with rage. On his way back to his office, Noah stopped by the glass wall overlooking the bay. Seagulls crossed the grey sky outside. He thought of his mother and how she might never fully understand the kind of battle he had chosen. But she would understand its meaning. When they refuse you a seat, she had once said, "Build your own plane." And she was right. Noah Bennett was no longer just building a plane. He was about to own the entire sky. 12 days later, the video titled, "Black CEO Kicked Out of Skyrealm Airlines." First Class was still raging online. It had surpassed 30 million views, drawn thousands of furious comments, and spawned dozens of editorials dissecting what they now called systemic discrimination in the American airline industry. In the middle of that storm, Noah Bennett remained silent. No statements, no posts, no interviews. His silence, strangely enough, seemed to frighten the financial world even more. In Skyrealm's glass headquarters in Chicago, CEO Charles Whitman slammed a stack of reports onto the table. The stock has dropped another 8%. The funds are pulling out. Who is responsible for this? His voice was hoarse, his face flushed red. On the big screen, the stock chart glowed in bright red, plunging like a stone. Beside him, Communications Director Vanessa Chen tried to stay composed. "We have issued a public apology, suspended the 2 employees involved, and promised an internal investigation. But the media will not let go. They are calling it performative compensation." Whitman roared. Because of him. Because that damned Bennett still refuses to say anything. He did not understand that Noah's silence was the first move in a much bigger plan. Across the country, Noah sat in a 40th floor conference room at Bennett Dynamics, watching on a live feed as Skyrealm slowly sank into panic. He did not need to speak. He only needed to wait. Operation Horizon Phase 2 had officially begun. Under his direction, the Bennett Dynamics team executed a campaign where every move was calculated. Mia Parker oversaw digital communications, managing what leaked out so that public outrage stayed just enough. Derek Miles and the legal team circulated anonymous think pieces exposing the hidden discriminatory architecture inside Skyrealm's internal procedures. Meanwhile, Chief Counsel Nina Patel prepared a class action lawsuit with dozens of passengers who had suffered similar treatment, ready to file at any moment. "Do not hit them with everything at once," Noah had instructed. "Let them believe we only want justice. What I want is control." One morning, Mia walked into his office with a market report in hand. Skyrealm has lost more than $1.4 billion in market capitalization in just 2 weeks. The hedge funds are gradually pulling out. The stock is now at its lowest in 4 years. Noah allowed himself a small smile. Good. Every beast weakens when it is wounded. That is when the hunter strikes. He pulled up another data set on the screen, a list of major investment funds holding Skyrealm stock. Some names were underlined in Red Alpine Capital Northwind Partners Trident Holdings. Noah had called them 3 days earlier, not as a victim, but as a potential investor with a plan to restructure Skyrealm. 3 calls, 3 quiet meetings, and 3 nods. Derek had asked, "Are you planning to accumulate their shares?" Noah had answered, his voice smooth as wind sliding across glass. "No, Derek. I am planning to accumulate trust. Once Skyrealm starts losing its sense of direction, they will sell everything cheap, even their soul. And when that happens, we will be the ones buying." At the same time, Skyrealm started fighting dirty. Whitman hired a crisis consulting firm to dig into Noah's past. One morning, online news exploded with headlines like "Bennett Dynamics under tax fraud scrutiny." Bennett's stock dipped slightly. Mia rushed into his office, tablet in hand, her voice tense. "They are going low. They fabricated a tax investigation and hired bots to push the hashtag fake CEO. Noah looked up, a cold smile on his face. Good. They have stepped out of defense, and when the strong lose their composure, that is when they reveal their weakest points. He gave the order. Hit back, but not directly. Send the Chronicle the internal documents on the Passenger Comfort Index algorithm. Protect the source. Emphasize this phrase, "The algorithm shows signs of racial bias." Mia stared at him. "You know this is going to blow them up." "Exactly," he replied. "Let Skyrealm light the match that burns itself down." 2 days later, the Chronicle published a bombshell investigation. The front-page headline screamed, "Did Skyrealm Airlines code discrimination into its system, passenger ranking algorithm, suspected of racial bias?" The entire country erupted. The Department of Transportation stepped in. Lawmakers called for hearings. Skyrealm's stock crashed another 21% in just 24 hours. In the office, Mia stared in disbelief at the chart in front of her. They are really collapsing. Noah rose, buttoned his suit jacket, and looked out the window. Light flashed in his eyes like a blade. "No, they have only fallen. I'm going to make sure they never get back up." That night, a message arrived on Noah's phone. The sender was anonymous. The content read, "I work at Skyrealm. I have internal data you want." Noah read it, sat silent for a few seconds, then replied, "Send it through a secure channel. Leave no trace. You will be protected." 2 hours later, a data package came through more than 400 emails and 37 internal documents detailing how Skyrealm had deliberately concealed discrimination lawsuits and altered HR reports to avoid federal audits. Noah read line after line, speechless. This was no longer about mistakes. This was policy. He looked at Mia. "Send everything to Nina Patel. Prepare the class action filing, but keep it under wraps for now. There is one more thing we have to do before we launch the lawsuit." Mia asked, "What is that?" Noah's lips curled slightly. "Buy Skyrealm stock. Now, through proxy funds. I want 15% in our hands before the end of the week." 2 days later, financial analysts were baffled. Skyrealm's stock was collapsing, yet a mysterious flow of capital kept buying. No one knew that behind those trades stood Bennett Dynamics, hidden behind a complex web of vehicles stretching from Zurich to San Francisco. Whitman was rattled. "Who is buying our stock?" Vanessa answered, her voice unsteady. "We do not know. It seems to be a new investment group. They are calling themselves Horizon Capital." Whitman frowned. Horizon. He had no idea that the name had been chosen by the very man he had humiliated 10 days earlier. That evening in his office at Bennett Dynamics, Noah stood watching the screen awash in green trading bars. He lifted a glass of red wine, the color reflecting in his steady eyes. Behind him, Mia said quietly, "You are taking down an entire empire, Noah." He replied, his voice low but firm. "No, Mia. I am just correcting a balance sheet. They built their power on contempt. I am going to teach them that respect has a higher market value than power." Outside the window, Atlanta's night blazed with city lights. No one out there knew that in the middle of that noisy city, the roles of hunter and hunted were beginning to reverse. And this time, the prey was not the black man who had once been humiliated, but the entire system that dared to look down on him. 3 weeks after the Skyrealm scandal, the atmosphere within the American airline industry felt like a storm that had suddenly gone still. Everyone knew Skyrealm was in freefall. No one dared to say it aloud. From Washington to New York, rival airlines quietly watched, waiting to see what the black man who had been humiliated at an airport would do next. They thought he would sue. What they didn't know was that Noah Bennett had chosen another path, the path of control. On Monday morning, sunlight flooded the 40th floor conference room at Bennett Dynamics headquarters. On the giant screen, the words Operation Horizon, Phase 3 glowed in silver against a black background, clean and sharp like a military command code. The entire executive board was present: Mia Parker, chief strategist; Derek Miles, chief of staff; Nina Patel, legal counsel; and dozens of experts in finance, communications, and technology. Noah entered wearing a black suit and silver tie, his focused gaze silencing the entire room. He didn't need to signal for attention. His first words, low and steady, were enough. "This is no longer a lawsuit. This is a corporate reconstruction campaign." Mia delivered the first report. "We now own 17.3% of Skyrealm shares through 7 trust funds. Discontented shareholders Northwind, Alpine, Orion have agreed to transfer their voting rights to the Horizon Group. In total, we control nearly 30% of the voting power." Derek nodded and added, "We've also quietly reached out to mid-level executives inside Skyrealm who are dissatisfied with Whitman's leadership. Many are ready to leave him if someone stronger takes the helm." Noah listened, his eyes never leaving the screen, where words flashed like bullets. Board vote, shareholder restructuring, proxy war class, action trigger. He said quietly, "It's time to make them open the door and invite us in." That afternoon, at Skyrealm headquarters in Chicago, Charles Whitman walked into an emergency meeting, his face drawn and pale. The company's stock had dropped another 6%. Their booking system was crashing repeatedly as users joined the boycott. Vanessa Chen, the communications director, trembled slightly as she placed a report on the table. "The public has turned against us. Even VIP clients are canceling flights. Partner airlines are pulling advertising contracts. We need to act, and we need to act now." Whitman slammed his hand on the table. "I sent Bennett a settlement offer, $10 million and a public apology." He didn't even respond. "What does he want?" From the corner of the room, Leonard Brooks, the chief legal officer, spoke in a hoarse voice. "I know what he wants. He's buying this company." The room went silent. Whitman spun around. "What did you just say?" Brooks sighed and tossed a folder onto the table. "Horizon Capital, the new investment fund that's been buying up Skyrealm shares. The real owner behind Horizon is Bennett Dynamics." Whitman took a step back as if he had been slapped. "Impossible. He's just a man who was humiliated." Brooks looked him dead in the eye. "No, sir. He's the man making our entire system bow." In the following days, the headlines multiplied. Who is secretly buying out Skyrealm Airlines? The market shaken by mysterious capital group known as Horizon. Financial analysts speculated that Horizon might be a coalition of multi-ethnic investors seeking to build a more equitable model of aviation. Whitman read the news and felt a wave of fear rise inside him, one he didn't dare name. He had once dismissed discrimination as a minor issue. Now it was devouring his fortune and his reputation. In San Francisco, Noah followed everything in silence. He wasn't triumphant and he didn't smile. He simply exhaled. The world doesn't change through speeches. It changes when those who think they're untouchable finally collapse. Mia looked at him and asked softly, "Will you stop once you gain control?" Noah shook his head. "No, Mia. When justice is on our side, we don't stop at revenge. We stop when the system itself changes." 3 days later, Bennett Dynamics announced an $800 million investment in advanced aviation infrastructure. No one realized that the $800 million was actually the bridge to completing the Skyrealm acquisition. At the same time, Noah appeared on a national financial television program. The host asked, "Mr. Bennett, there are rumors that you're leading a campaign to acquire Skyrealm Airlines. Do you confirm this?" Noah smiled slightly, his gaze calm. "I'm not interested in owning an airline. I'm interested in how they treat people. And sometimes, to change that, you have to take the controls yourself." His answer spread like wildfire. Skyrealm's stock plunged another 12%. Major shareholders began calling Noah, eager to discuss strategic partnerships. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Whitman could barely sleep. Calls began pouring in from former investors. "We're questioning your leadership, Charles. Maybe Bennett should join the board." Each call was another blade sinking into the pride of a man who had once thought he ruled the skies. On the 5th night, he received a message from an unknown number. "Charles, stop fighting. Meet me." The signature at the bottom, NB. They met in a private conference room at the Waldorf Astoria. No assistants, no recordings, just 2 men, one who had been humiliated and one who had humiliated him. Whitman spoke first. "You've won Bennett. What do you want, money, fame?" An apology. Noah looked him straight in the eye, his voice low and sharp. "I don't want money. I want the chance to rebuild Skyrealm, not for me, but for everyone who's ever been treated like me." Whitman let out a bitter laugh. "Rebuild? You're going to turn this airline into a charity." Noah leaned forward, his tone cold as steel. "No, Charles. I'm going to turn it into the first company to prove that ethics and profit can fly on the same plane. But unfortunately, you no longer have the qualifications to sit in the cockpit." Whitman fell silent. In the dim light of the room, his face seemed to age 10 years. Finally he whispered, half in defeat, half in admiration, "You remind me of myself when I was young, except you didn't let hatred blind you." Noah replied softly, "No, I just let justice lead the way." 3 days later, the official announcement broke. Horizon Capital had secured 37% of Skyrealm Airlines' shares. Noah Bennett was appointed to the board of directors as a shareholder representative. The news exploded across every major outlet. The man who had once been dragged out of a first-class seat was now sitting at the table where the fate of that airline would be decided. That night, Noah returned to the San Francisco office. Mia was waiting in the hallway and asked quietly, "Do you regret it? Becoming the center of this storm?" He looked at her and smiled faintly, his eyes distant. "Regret, no. I just feel lighter. Because some battles can't be won in a single day, but the moment you dare to begin, the world has already changed." He walked toward the glass wall and looked out at the city, its lights glowing like thousands of stars. And above that sky, a Sky Realm plane lifted off, carrying the name of the man they once looked down upon. Noah spoke softly, his voice steady like a vow. "We're not done. This fight has only just reached its first layer of clouds." The morning sun over Chicago gleamed like molten metal. The headquarters of Sky Realm Airlines, an icon of aviation power for more than 4 decades, stood unnervingly silent, like a ship waiting for its final command to dock. Outside, the press lined up in rows. Inside, Noah Bennett walked through the lobby with calm, measured steps, dressed in a black suit, his gaze steady. The security guard at the reception desk froze for a moment. Less than a month ago, this same company had dragged him out of a first-class seat. Now he had returned, as its largest shareholder, the man who held control over the board of directors. On the 38th floor, the conference room was brightly lit, 12 chairs surrounding a walnut table. At the head of it stood Charles Whitman, the former CEO, wearing a stiff, uneasy smile. "Welcome, Mr. Bennett. Shall we begin?" Noah nodded and sat down. He didn't need to raise his voice. The tension in the room was enough to command silence. He opened his tablet and projected a document onto the screen. "In front of you are the evidences of Sky Realm's discriminatory system over the past 7 years, hundreds of internal emails, algorithm codes, altered HR reports, and non-disclosure agreements used to bury the truth." A white board member stood up, voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" Noah looked directly at him. "I want change, real change. No more excuses, no more press statements of apology." He pressed a button, and the screen displayed the title, Comprehensive Restructuring Plan, Phoenix Protocol. No one spoke. Noah continued his tone, calm but resolute. "I'm not here to destroy Sky Realm. I'm here to rebuild it. But anyone who had a hand in these corrupt policies will leave today." 2 hours later, 7 board members signed their resignation letters. Whitman said nothing as he placed his signature on the final page and walked out of the room, his steps heavy like the shadow of the past, fading behind a glass door. Noah didn't look after him. He simply said, "The end is not about revenge. It's about the beginning of a responsibility." That afternoon, he addressed all senior employees. The air was thick with uncertainty and fear. Noah stepped onto the platform, the spotlight cutting across his face, half in light, half in shadow. "I know you're worried," he began. "But I didn't come here to fire anyone. I came to end an era of fear. From this day forward, every passenger will be seen not by the color of their skin, but by the worth of their humanity." He paused, letting the words sink in as his gaze swept across the room. "Sky Realm once made me bow my head, but today I stand here to make sure no one else ever has to." A wave of soft applause broke out, slowly building until it filled the hall. Among the hundreds of faces, some eyes began to shine, not just with hope, but with the quiet belief that justice could finally exist inside the walls of a corporation. That evening, Noah stood alone by the wide glass window, watching the city shimmer beneath the lights. Maya entered carrying a cup of hot coffee. "You did it," she said softly. Noah smiled faintly. "Not yet. We've only taken off. A company can change its name overnight, but to change the hearts of people, it takes time and courage." Outside the old sky realm, planes still lined the sky in their familiar formation. But in Noah's mind, he already saw a new image, a new logo taking shape, phoenix air wings of fire symbolizing rebirth. He closed his eyes and whispered as if to himself, "The day they pulled me out of first class, I thought I had lost." But that was the day justice began to take flight. 2 months later, Sky Realm officially changed its name to Phoenix Air. The logo of flaming wings appeared on every aircraft billboard and across the company's website, accompanied by a new slogan, "Where dignity takes flight." Noah Bennett stepped onto the stage at the brand's launch ceremony. In front of hundreds of employees and members of the media, he said, "A year ago, I was dragged out of a first-class seat. Today, I stand here not for revenge, but to prove that respect is not just a virtue. It is a form of power in business." Below the stage, people who had once worked in fear now rose to their feet and applauded. Maya watched him, her eyes brimming with tears. On the screen behind them, Phoenix Air's stock index surged, surpassing all projections. Noah looked up toward the sky through the glass wall of the hall where a plane had just taken off, leaving behind a long trail of light like a burning flame. He smiled softly and whispered, "The Phoenix has risen again. And this time, it will never bow its head." 1 year after its rebranding, Phoenix Air had become the airline with the highest customer satisfaction rating in the United States. There were no more complaints, no more suspicious glances. At the check-in counters, only flights filled with trust and dignity. In the first-class cabin of the Seattle to Atlanta flight, Noah sat in seat 2A, the very seat from which he had been dragged a year earlier. Beside him sat an elderly black woman, a doctor who smiled as she recognized him. "Thanks to you, I finally found the courage to fly again after so many years," she said. Noah replied softly, "It's not thanks to me. It's thanks to everyone who believed that dignity is worth protecting." As the plane touched the clouds, the captain's voice echoed over the intercom. "Thank you for choosing Phoenix Air, the first airline in the world committed to absolute equality for every passenger." Noah looked out the window, golden sunlight washing over the wings of the plane. He smiled and thought to himself, justice doesn't just land anymore. Today, it has learned to fly. From the perspective of a leadership and business ethics expert, the story of Noah Bennett is not merely a journey from humiliation to power. It is proof that when justice is guided by intellect and compassion, it can transform hatred into change and prejudice into progress. Phoenix Air is more than just an airline. It is a symbol of a world where human dignity becomes the standard, not a privilege. If you believe that respect is the wing on which justice flies, please like and subscribe to help spread this message. And comment below as a personal promise to yourself and to the world. Keep dignity.